The Honourable Brian Walker.
Thank you, President. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Members, we weren't sitting last week when the country and indeed the Commonwealth observed Remembrance Day. I was travelling on that day, but in my heart I did remember. And I have no doubt that most of us attended and heard that ode being recited. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. It's a sentiment that has seeped into our psyche in Australia, a tangible part of who we are, who we see ourselves being as Australians. But I want to take a moment as close as I can to Remembrance Day to acknowledge the town of Victoria Park for the service it held honouring the sacrifice of Pvt Alec Ernest James Bell, who died of wounds received in action in Vietnam on the 29th of January 1968. Members will recall me speaking before, I'm sure, about my own parents taking me out of Australia, in no small part driven by the desire to make sure I didn't serve in Vietnam. And for that reason, and for others which will become apparent, Pvt Bell's story resonates with me quite strongly. He was a son, a brother, an uncle, and, you could say, a hero. The second youngest of 6 children, born to Robert and Florence Bell, born 1946 in Welshpool, an ordinary West Australian family. His father worked on the railway. His mother was a seamstress, a skilled seamstress. His sister, Alec's sister Margaret, would describe their parents, and by extension the whole family, as ordinary people living in extraordinary times, raising their families to be enterprising, resourceful, and to enjoy life. Alec and his siblings went to St Francis Xavier College, that's now the Ursula Frayne Catholic College, and he graduated at the end of year 10, 15 years old and 9 months. He went to work in the Postmaster General's office, telegraph boy, and later as a postal officer at the GPO in Perth. Now, when the Menzies government introduced selective national service in the mid-60s, he found himself chosen by ballot and sent off to train at the 2nd Recruit Training Battalion in Pakipanal in Victoria. From there, he went to the 3rd Infantry Training Battalion. Within 6 months, he was on his way to Vietnam as a rifleman. 6 months, it's usually 1 year training. And I recall at that time standing shortly before a ballot, demanded of myself and the peers where one of us might have gone to Vietnam. He went. I could have gone. Now, medical support at that time was very limited in the field. You had doctors at the regimental level, medics at company level, at the platoon level, stretcher bearers. And they had the most basic first aid training, the most basic training. Such colleagues found themselves facing potentially devastating situations, conditions, maybe treating friends with whom a short while before had a drink or shared a meal, and with horrible wounds, or maybe just minor things, mosquito bites, but harrowing. Experiences I am with ED and all the things I have done in my life, I think I would find such a situation more than harrowing. He found himself assigned as a rifleman, but also as a stretcher bearer for the 2nd Platoon A Company, 7th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment. And as such, he disembarked from HMAS Sydney in Vung Tau, Vietnam, 20th of April 1967. Now, Ian Garthwaite, that's Alec's platoon commander, remembered Alec in these terms. Pvt Bell took his responsibilities most seriously. The moment he donned his medical kit, he was ready to go forward into the middle of a firefight to help a mate in trouble. When the cry of medic cut through the deafening noise of rifles, machine guns, and the ear-splitting crash of artillery, Alec was the man you wanted to see running or crawling towards you, lying beside you, bringing an end to the pain, stopping the bleeding, reassuring you that you'd be drinking beer in the Soldier's Bruiser in a few days' time. His courage under fire was well known. Pvt Bell was killed on 29th of January 1968 during Operation Coburg in Bien Hoa Province, South Vietnam, when his platoon was ambushed by a much stronger enemy force. One of his surviving colleagues, Sergeant Bourke, recalled, "In the first few moments, the platoon commander, 2nd Lieutenant O'Brien, and all the NCOs were wounded, including Pvt Bell, who had received a direct hit from a rocket. Even though shockingly wounded, Pvt Bell tried to get to the other wounded. When he could not move, he gave orders to another soldier as to how to help them. Even when we finally got him onto the dust-off stretcher, Pvt Bell was still giving advice as to the care of the other wounded. As he was lifted up through the trees, the enemy opened fire again. The dust-off was forced to leave the area with Pvt Bell and stretcher hanging beneath. We later learned that he was dead on arrival at hospital. 12 men from 2nd Platoon were wounded that day, but only Private Bell died of those wounds, quite possibly as a result of his own courage and commitment to his fellow soldiers, struggling to offer medical assistance and advice when he himself had been badly injured. Sir Philip Lynch, the Minister for the Army, writing to Alec's grieving parents back in Perth, noted, "I have read with feeling the report of his brave conduct before and after he received a mortal wound, and I can assure you he died in a manner worthy of an Australian soldier." At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. So the ode reminds us, yet Private Bell's remains rest in Section KA of Karrakatta Cemetery. The grant status on his grave is listed by the Metropolitan Cemetery Board as expired, and that area is scheduled for imminent renewal. The years, it seems, have indeed condemned Private Bell, in spite of all our public protestations to the contrary. He was a man close to my own age then, just 21 years old when he died, fighting in a war that I narrowly avoided fighting in, undertaking the sort of medical task that doctors and nurses might undertake on a daily basis, albeit in far more harrowing and dangerous circumstances. So I can't help but feel a connection to this story from Pvt Alec Bell. To think of his grave being built over to provide modern mausoleum, which could so easily be built elsewhere, that fills me with sadness, members. I hope that the Minister will involve himself in the case and do all that he can to ensure that Private Bell's grave remains undisturbed. Of course, what I really like is for him to put an end to this whole renewal issue as a whole and leave all our beloved dead to rest in peace. They all deserve our remembrance. But given his actions on our behalf, perhaps Private Bell, first and foremost amongst them today, lest we forget.